It was one of those nights when the fog seemed alive. The fields outside my cabin were nothing but silver waves under a flickering porch light, and the world felt empty to sound, except for that lull on the wind sometimes makes when it doesn't know where to go. I'd been recording stories like these for years, late at night, whispering into a mic while the rest of the town slept. But this time, the story started whispering back. I remember sitting by the open window, the damp air crawling in, when I noticed something moving in the field, tall, still, and wrong. My light stuttered once, twice, then died completely. For a moment, I thought I saw someone standing out there, half lost in the fog, their face tilted toward my window. I told myself it was just a miss, that the night plays tricks when you stare too long. But then I heard the recorder click on by itself, and that's when I saw it. The wheat was high that night, higher than my waist, brushing against my coat, and the cold autumn air carried this faint smell of dry grass and old dirt. I remember the moon hanging low. A pale light spread across the field, soft and cloudy, like it didn't want to wake anything hiding out there. I walked slowly, hands in my pockets, breathing in the quiet. But the quiet wasn't quiet. There was something beneath it, something low, a small, steady hum. At first, I thought it was the wind, the way it slipped through the stalks, shaking them with a soft rustling. But the hum didn't sway or move. It just stayed, one long note. I kept walking, my shoes pressed into the cool soil, and the hum followed, not louder, just closer. I stopped. The field stopped with me. Even the insects felt silent for a moment, like they were listening. The hum stayed under my right foot, deep in the dirt, a faint vibration rising up through my heel, like something breathing slow. I stepped back. The hum slid with me, one pace to the left, and it shifted again, crawling under the ground to keep itself at my feet. It shouldn't do that. Nothing underground should move that cleanly, that fast. I crouched down, letting my fingers brush the soil. It was dry on top, but cold underneath, as if the earth held some trapped pocket of night. The hum pulsed once, a trembling push of air that warmed the dirt against my palm. I felt my throat tighten, a strange mix of curiosity and fear, the kind that makes you lean in when you know you shouldn't. The wheat swayed behind me, a slow, whispering shift, but there was no breeze. I stood up again, wiping the dirt from my hand. The hum followed, sliding to stay under my weight as if my footsteps were calling it. Stop, I whispered. I don't know why I said it out loud. Maybe I just wanted to hear something human. The field didn't answer, but the hum paused, not fading, not leaving, just holding its breath. I took another step. It came back, this time softer but closer, like warm air rising through cracked soil and brushing the inside of my shoe. The moonlight dimmed behind a patch of fog, drifting low across the field. Everything looked pale then, washed out, blurry. The wheat turned into a sea of shadows, moving slow. I kept walking, each step careful. The earth felt thin under me, almost hollow. I could smell damp clay, something old and metallic, like rust buried deep. The hum changed, a little higher, not a note anymore, but a shaky inhale, breathing, long and uneven like something learning how to do it. I froze, my chest tightened with a cold, sharp fear, because breathing has rhythm. Breathing can listen. The inhale deepened, and another one followed a second later, like it was syncing with me. I stepped back again. The wheat whispered. The soil trembled under my heel. The breath followed, closer, warmer. I felt it rise between the stalks, brushing my ankle like a small exhale pushing upward. The fog thickened around me, spreading cool moisture against my cheeks. I could hear wet dirt settling, tiny cracks opening beneath the wheat. I didn't want to look down, but I did. The soil wasn't flat anymore. It moved in a slow, round lift, like a steady pulse beneath the surface, trying to push up, trying to meet the air. I whispered, "Please." I don't know the rest of that sentence. I just knew the field felt wrong, alive in a way the earth shouldn't be. I backed away, eyes locked on that rising patch of dirt. My breaths were short. The hum followed each one, shifting pitch in a faint echo. Then, silence. The pulse stopped. The soil settled. The hum faded into nothing. The field stood still. Even the fog seemed to hold its place. I waited, listening to the emptiness, feeling the cold night press against my skin. One heartbeat, two, three, then, from somewhere deep under the wheat, farther away now, a soft, uneven exhale drifted through the dirt. Not beneath me, not following, just watching. I turned quietly and walked back the way I came. Slow steps, light breaths, trying not to disturb whatever had gone still beneath the field. The wheat brushed my arms as I left. The night opened wider. The path home glowed faintly ahead. Behind me, somewhere under that endless dark soil, the breathing settled back into a low, patient hum. I didn't look back. The road was empty that night. A thin strip of cracked asphalt cutting through fields that had long turned dark for winter. Fog rolled low across the ground, thick in some places, thin in others, moving like slow breath over the frozen grass. I drove with one hand on the wheel, the heater clicking softly, my headlights pushing a pale tunnel through the mist. There was a quiet sadness in the air, the kind that comes with empty roads and long distances that feel heavier than they should. People used to tell stories about this back road, old stories, easily forgotten until nights like this, about a girl with a lantern seen wandering the fog after storms. I didn't believe it. I just remembered the legend the way you remember static from a faraway radio. But then the fog shifted, parted just a little, and something glowed inside it. A small, steady light, warm and soft like a candle held close to the face. I slowed down. My tires hissed on the wet asphalt. The steering wheel felt colder under my hands. The light floated near the ditch line. Not swinging, not flickering. Just a quiet glow standing alone in the gray. As the car crept closer, the shape around the light came into view. A girl, still, thin, almost weightless in the fog. Her hair hung long, silver in the headlights. Her dress was pale, old-fashioned, brushing the tops of her bare ankles. And in her hand, the lantern, a simple metal frame, holding a glass orb of soft gold. I should have driven on. I should have kept my eyes forward. But the fog pressed against the windows, and everything around her felt suspended in time. Wonder mixed with something colder. A pull I didn't understand. I slowed to a crawl. The girl didn't turn. She just stood there holding her lantern up against the wind. Only, the wind was blowing the other way. The fog rolled left. Her dress drifted right. But the lantern's flame leaned forward toward my car, as if something inside it was reaching out. My breath hitched. My hands tightened on the wheel. The glass of the lantern pulsed once. A faint hum drifting through the air so soft, I felt it more than heard it. The girl finally moved. Her head turned, slow and heavy like she hadn't done it in years. Her face was pale. Too pale. Her eyes dark in a way that didn't reflect the headlights. I stopped the car. The tires settled. The engine hummed weakly, as if it didn't want to be there. The girl didn't blink, didn't breathe. Her lantern glowed brighter, casting long shadows through the fog shadows that didn't match her shape. I whispered, "Are you okay?" The words felt tiny, lost in the thick cold air. She didn't react. But the flame inside the lantern bent again, straining toward me, as if drawn by my voice. The fog swirled around her feet. A faint rustling rose in the grass, like something moving underneath it. I opened my door halfway. Cold rushed in. The air tasted like wet metal. The flame shuddered, then steadied, then leaned harder in my direction, even though the wind swept it the other way. Something wasn't right. Something in my chest knew it. A pressure, a warning, a stillness too deep. I stepped onto the road. Gravel pressed through my shoes, and the fog curled around my legs. The lantern brightened, almost white now, casting a glow that made her skin look thinner, almost see-through. I took one step closer. Just one, and the lantern went out. Total darkness swallowed her. The fog folded inward, and the air fell into a sudden, heavy silence. I froze, my breath sharp as ice in my throat. The space where she had been felt wrong, like the world had been cut out in that shape, and nothing filled it anymore. A soft shift came from the grass like a footstep without weight. Another, closer. I stepped back. My heels scraped the asphalt. The fog thickened until I could barely see the car behind me. I didn't call out, didn't ask anything. My throat wouldn't move. There was one more soft step, then nothing. Just silence. Deep and waiting, I slipped back into the car, closing the door with shaking hands. My headlights pushed forward again, but the road ahead was empty. No girl, no lantern, no glow left in the fog. I drove slowly, the heater ticking, my breath fogging the glass. In the rear-view mirror, the mist settled back over the ditch. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw a faint speck of light floating in the gray, but it didn't follow, and I didn't stop again. The windmill stood at the end of the old dirt path. Late autumn air pressed cold against my jacket, and the sky held that dim, bruised color right before night takes over. The fields around it were quiet. Tall weeds brushed together in thin, rustling waves, and the earth smelled like damp soil and dry straw. I walked slowly toward the windmill. Its wooden frame leaned to one side, and the blades hung crooked, frozen in place. They hadn't turned in years. Everyone in town said that. Yet every night when the air grew still, a low hum rose from this place, soft and steady like someone breathing inside the walls. Curiosity pulled me closer, a quiet ache in my chest telling me I needed to know why. The grass brushed my ankles. The wind fell away. For a moment, everything felt held in one long, waiting breath. Then I heard it, the hum, low, steady, deep, vibrating through the air like a pulse slowly waking. It slipped between the weeds and pressed lightly against my ears as if calling me forward. I stopped a few feet from the door. My heart thudded once, hard enough that I felt it in my throat. The hum matched it, one beat behind. I touched the door. The wood felt soft with rock cool against my fingertips and carrying that faint tremble beneath the surface. I pushed it open. Dust drifted in the thin, pale light, pouring through the cracks in the roof. The inside smelled like old rope and wet dirt and something faintly metallic. The hum swelled gently, almost as if it sensed me step inside. The floor creaked under my weight. Something cold brushed my cheek, a passing draft, or something moving just out of sight. I glanced up. The beams curved overhead like ribs, and the blades outside were visible through a broken panel, still hanging lifeless, still frozen. But then the smallest shift echoed through the space. A slow, strained creak that would bending, as if the blades were pushing against the still air. My breath caught. I took another step toward the center of the room. The hum tapped against my heartbeat again, not copying it, matching it like the windmill was breathing with me. Every pulse echoed inside the walls deep and slow, until it felt like the whole building moved in rhythm with my chest. I whispered something to myself, a tiny thought, just to break the quiet. The hum dipped as if listening. I reached out and touched the central post. The wood vibrated under my palm, warm in places cold and others like something shifting deep inside it. Then a gust of air slid past me, though the doorway was still, and the outside wind had died. The blades creaked again, a long, dragging groan like hands were pushing them inch by inch against years of rust. I stepped back. My heels scraped the floor and dust rose in a thin cloud. The hum grew louder, tightening around the room, pressing into my ears and down into my chest. My heartbeat sped up. The hum followed, growing quicker, matching every uneven beat, until it felt like the windmill was inside me, or I was inside it, and our rhythms were not separate anymore. A shadow shifted between the beams above. Just a thin line of movement. Too quick, too quiet. I felt the air tighten. Heard the blades outside twitch with cracking a soft moan of strain, even though no wind touched them. I backed toward the door. The hum softened, just a little, as if it didn't want me to leave. But my pulse was racing now, and it chased every beat, echoing it, layering over it, until I couldn't tell which was mine. I reached the doorway. The night air felt sharp cold enough to bite my lungs. The hum slipped after me, faint through the wood, a distant echo, like it was trying to hold on. But it didn't cross the threshold. I stepped into the open field. The grass bent under my shoes. The sky darkened fully. Behind me, the windmill stood still again. Silent, waiting. I listened for a long time, hands shaking at my sides. No hum, no creak, just quiet. But as I walked away down the dirt path, I felt my heartbeat slow, returning to its normal rhythm, steady, and mine again. And for a moment, deep in the distance, I thought I heard one last soft beat echoing from the windmill, perfectly in time with my own, before fading into the night. The field was wide and quiet that week. Late summer heat still clung to the grass, and the earth held that warm, dusty smell that rises after sunset. I camped at the far edge where the tall stalks swayed in slow, lazy waves, and the air felt thick with the last breath of daylight. My tent sat alone in a small clearing. Firelight flickered against the canvas, casting soft shadows that rose and fell like sleeping animals. I liked the quiet, the gentle rustling, the low hum of insects hidden deep in the dark. It felt peaceful, safe, almost alive in a comforting way. On the first night, I spoke aloud just to break the stillness. Something small, a thought drifting through my mind, and the field repeated it. Not loud, not clear, just a soft little whisper rolling through the grass shaped like my words, but bent slightly as if spoken by someone half asleep. I froze. The fire popped once. Warm light brushed my hands. I waited for the wind to explain it, but the air was still, and the whispers faded like they were dissolving back into the soil. I tried again the next evening, said something simple, a quiet greeting to the night. The field whispered it back, longer this time, stretching every syllable as if learning how my voice worked. I laughed under my breath. The whisper followed, echoing the laugh, but slower, like it didn't understand the shape of it. Wonder tingled through me, a soft thrill, like finding something hidden, something meant only for me. But by the third night, the feeling began to shift. I spoke from inside my tent, and the whisper didn't come from the grass outside. It came from behind the thin fabric, moving from one wall to the next at the height of my shoulders, as if tracing where my voice had been. When I stopped talking, it stopped too, a perfect mimic watching me in the silence. I barely slept that night. The field rustled every few minutes, breathing in slow, uneven waves, as if waiting for me to speak again. On the last night, the air grew cooler. Fog crawled in low from the hills, sliding around the tent smelling like wet soil and crushed leaves. I sat by the dying fire, hands wrapped around a cup of lukewarm tea, listening to the night stretch thin around me. I didn't speak, not a word, but the field whispered anyway. Just one line, soft, hushed, coming from everywhere at once. "Are you still there?" My throat tightened. The cup shook in my hands. The fire dimmed to a faint glow. I waited, hoping it was my imagination, hoping it was just the grass moving wrong. But the whisper came again, closer, curling around my ankles like cold breath. Still there? The fog thickened, pressing cool against my skin. The grass rustled, though no wind passed through it. I whispered back, without meaning to. "Yes." The field answered in a thin, broken voice, repeating my yes, but not copying it, turning it into something searching, something hungry for more. The grass bent toward me like many small hands brushing forward. Shadows shifted at the edges of the clearing, soft shapes rising and lowering as if the ground itself listened. I stepped back toward the tent. My heartbeat thumped hard enough to make the air around me feel tight. The field whispered again this time before I could speak. "Don't go." The sound wrapped around my wrist, a cold pressure light, but certain like fingers made of fog. I ducked into the tent, pulled the zipper closed, sat in the darkness, breathing fast. The whispers pressed against the thin fabric, circling me, echoing little sounds, little breaths, trying to match mine, trying to pull something from the quiet. I held my breath. The field fell silent, listening. Seconds stretched long, too long. Then a single whisper slipped to the fabric right behind my ear, closer than any voice should be. "Stay." My skin crawled. My eyes stung with fear. I didn't answer. I stayed still until fire outside died completely, and the field grew quiet enough to feel almost empty again. When the first pale light of dawn touched the canvas, the whispers faded. The air loosened. The field stopped listening. I packed quickly, feeling the grass watch me bent low under morning dew. As I left, a faint rustling followed my footsteps, soft, slow, almost sad. By the time I reached the road, the field stood silent behind me, just grass, just wind, nothing else. But sometimes late at night, I think I hear a small whisper, repeating some forgotten word, spoken only once. Still there, still listening. The mornings on the farm always start the same. Cold air, wet soil, a pale stretch of light rising slow over the fields. But that week, something felt wrong. Even before I opened the door, I felt it, a thin unease, like the land was holding its breath. I had replaced the old scarecrow 3 days before. The wind had torn the last one apart, stuffing drifting across the fields like scraps of old snow. The new one stood clean and tall. Fresh straw, pale cloth wrapped tight around its frame. A burlap face without features stitched just enough to suggest where eyes should be. I set it far out in the field, where it belonged. A small figure in the wide, rustling sea of crops. But the next morning it wasn't there. It stood halfway to the house, leaning forward slightly, its pale cloth damp with dew, as if it had walked through the night. I stared at it for a long time. The air smelled of cold dirt and cut stems. My breath misted out in front of me. I told myself I'd misremembered the distance, moved it too close, didn't think straight. But the soil around its base was disturbed, soft, shifted, like something had dragged its feet across the field. The second morning it stood even closer, right at the edge of the yard, straw hands hanging at its sides tilted as if listening for something. A pale shadow in the early light. Fear crept under my skin slow and steady like cold water, soaking through fabric. I didn't touch it. I didn't move it. I just watched it from the window, feeling its blank burlap face pointed toward my house, toward me. The third morning it stood at the porch steps, right there waiting. Straw scattered across the boards as if it had brushed against them in the dark. The air tasted like old earth. Heavy. Still, I dragged it out to far field myself. Threw it down. Didn't care if the frame cracked. As I walked away, the wheat rustled behind me slow and steady like soft footsteps trailing my own. That night I didn't sleep. The silence pressed too hard. The walls felt thin. Every shift of the wind made the house creak, like it was breathing. Before dawn, I lit a lantern, grabbed a shovel, and went to field. The scarecrow stood where I'd left it, but the straw was darker, wet, smelling like cold soil and something older. I didn't hesitate. I pulled it apart piece by piece, tossing the pale cloth into a pit. I dug myself my hands, shaking in the lantern's glow. I burned it, watched the cloth curl and the straw twist into black smoke, rising sharp into the morning air. By sunrise there was nothing left but ash. I thought it was over. That night the fog came early, thick, low, pressing its damp breath into the cracks of the windows. I sat by the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold, trying to keep my thoughts quiet. Then I smelled it. Smoke, faint, old, mixed with the scent of wet soil and burned straw. My chest tightened. The house creaked long and low, as if shifting under some new weight. Then a knock at the window. Soft, 3 gentle taps, like fingertips brushing the glass. I didn't move. The fog pressed hard against the panes, turning everything outside into pale, shifting shapes. Another knock, slower this time, almost patient. The smell of ash thickened, curling into the room, seeping into my clothes, filling my throat with the taste of burnt earth. My breath stuttered. My hands trembled against the table. The third knock came. Close, right beside my ear, as if something leaned against the window, listening for me. I forced myself to look. Just a silhouette blurred through the fog. Tall, still, the faint outline of cloth and a sagging head, as if the figure were slumped from long travel. For a moment the shadow seemed to lift its arm, straw dragging in a slow arc across the glass, leaving a smear of dark earth behind. I backed away, each step quiet, each breath colder than the last. The fog swirled outside, dulling the shape, blurring it, pulling it back into its pale depths. The knocking stopped. The smell lingered. I didn't sleep again. By morning the fog was gone. The yard was empty. Just fresh dirt under the window pressed into 2 long, soft tracks like something had stood there all night, watching, waiting. Sometimes I still smell smoke late in the evening, when the air is still and the fields rustle without wind. Sometimes I hear faint knocking far away, or maybe too close. And every time I wonder if burning it was a mistake it was waiting for. Early autumn, cool morning air, a thin layer of fog drifting low across the backfield. I walked the fence line with my hands in my pockets, breath slipping out in pale clouds, boots brushing through wet grass that clung to my ankles. The world felt quiet, too quiet. Even the insects held their hum. That was when I saw it. A dark shape above the old fence post. Not perched, not flying, just hanging there, frozen in the air. A crow suspended mid-flight, Wings spread, every feather sharp against the pale light. I stopped. My throat felt dry. My skin prickled like the air had turned to static. The crow didn't move. Not its wings. Not its chest. Nothing. Only its shadow trembled beneath it, stretched thin on the fog-soft ground. I took one slow step closer. The grass rustled. The air felt heavier, as if I had stepped into someone else's breath. Another step, and the cold deepened, pressing against my arms, sliding beneath my collar. I reached out. My fingers shook. Not from fear, not yet, but from the strange stillness around me, the way the world seemed to hold itself tight. When I touched the bird's wing, it felt like ice, hard, unmoving, as if it had been carved out of midnight. But its eyes shifted. Just the eyes. Slow, deliberate, following my hand. My stomach dropped. I stepped back, heels sliding in the damp dirt, heart ticking faster, louder than the quiet field. The crow didn't fall. It didn't fly. It simply floated there, locked in place, watching me with a gaze too alive for a body that still. I whispered a tiny breath of a word. Why? And the fog curled around it as if listening. I didn't touch it again. I couldn't. I walked away, each step slower than the last, feeling the weight of those eyes pressing into the back of my neck long after the crow faded from sight. The rest of the day felt wrong. Shadows seemed thicker. The air carried a faint, metallic taste. Every corner of the house hummed with a quiet I couldn't place. When night came, the sky hung low, clouds drifting like old smoke. I left the porch light on, though I couldn't explain why. I tried to sleep. I lay still in the dark, listening to my own breath fold into the silence. Sometime after midnight, a soft weight pressed onto my shoulder. Light, feathery, cold. I froze. My eyes adjusted to the dim glow through the curtains, and I saw the shape perched on me, wings tucked close, black feathers gleaming with a wet sheen, like dew or something heavier. The same crow, the one from the fence. Its talons barely pinched my skin, but the chill seeped deep, sliding down my arm. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. The crow tilted its head toward my ear, and the room felt smaller, closing in as if the walls leaned forward to listen. When it spoke, its voice wasn't a bird's. It wasn't rough or sharp. It was human, soft, familiar, a voice I knew from years ago, from a night I tried hard to forget, a voice soaked in regret, in the kind of silence that follows something broken. My chest tightened, my pulse stumbled. I wanted to turn, to look, to understand, but the whisper brushed against my ear, warm against the cold feathers. Why did you leave me alone? The room seemed to sway. My breath hitched. My vision prickled with pale static. I closed my eyes, and the crow's wing brushed my cheek, slow and cold. Then nothing. No wait. No whisper. Just the soft rustling of curtains and the faint hum of the night, settling back into itself. When I opened my eyes, I was alone, but the air still carried that familiar warmth, fading too slowly, like a hand pulling away from mine. I don't know if the crow ever left the house. I don't know if it was ever a crow at all. Some nights, when the fog drifts low along the fence line, I feel a breath near my ear, soft, close, waiting, and I keep my eyes forward, my step steady, because I'm afraid that if I turn, I'll see black wings floating behind me, caught in the stillness of a world that finally learned how to whisper back. Late winter, gray sky, cold light barely pushing through the thin clouds draped over the valley. I sat alone in the old ranger shed, breath drifting in pale swirls, fingers stiff in the chill that slid into the cracked window frame. The field radio sat on the desk, dusty, heavy, quiet. I only kept it on for weather updates. Small things that made the long nights feel less empty. Outside, the wind brushed against the siding, a low hum that made the walls seem to breathe. I reached out, turned the dial a little to the left, listening to the soft rise of static. Just static, soft, even, lonely. I leaned back in the chair, letting the silence settle. Then the static shifted. A tiny dip, a pulse, like a heartbeat pressed through wires. I leaned forward. My hand hovered over the radio. Another pulse came through, steady, short, sharp. Not random. A pattern. My skin prickled. My breath grew thin. A distress call. I knew the rhythm. Everyone who trained on these radios did. My chest tightened with something cold and familiar. The code repeated, over and over. A beacon calling out into the emptiness. But no towers were active in this area anymore. Not since the old fire tower was torn down 4 years ago, after collapse during a storm. There shouldn't be any signal. Not from here. Not from anywhere close. The air in the shed felt heavier, as if the walls had leaned in closer to hear. I turned the volume up a hair. The static swelled, then dipped again into that same pattern. My name used to be broadcast from that tower. Shift check-ins. Routine calls. A place I spent so many quiet nights climbing, listening to the wind rustle the treetops far below. I rubbed my hands together, trying to chase the cold from my fingers, trying to steady the rising hum in my chest. After the tower fell, the radios went silent. All of them. Until now, I stared at the speaker, as if I could look through it, as if the wires might show me something I wasn't ready to see. The signal repeated again, but this time it continued. More beats, longer ones, short ones, a rhythm that felt too intentional. I grabbed a small notepad from the desk, scribbling down every pulse, my handwriting shaking slightly. It wasn't a standard code. It wasn't a weather report. It wasn't another distress call. I listened again, each beat tapping against the quiet of the shed, each breath of static brushing against my ear. When I decoded it, my stomach dropped. It spelled my name, slowly, carefully, as if whoever was sending it knew I was alone, knew I would hear, knew I would answer. The radio crackled softly, the static settling into a low hum, like breath pressed against the speaker grill. I whispered, without meaning to, "Who's there?" The air held the warmth of my voice for a moment, then cooled again, leaving only the faint smell of old dust and winter air creeping under the door. The static thickened, rose, then fell. The pattern changed. A new sequence, slower, dragging, like someone tapping through layers of snow. I wrote it down, my heart knocking against my ribs, each beat matching the radio's pulses. When I read the new message, my throat tightened. Come back. My breath fogged in front of me, curling into thin tendrils that drifted toward the window. The tower's location lay miles away, past the forest, past the ridge. Nothing left but a twisted frame of metal half buried in the earth. Nothing there should be calling me. The radio went silent for a moment, a long stretch of quiet that felt almost like sleep. I waited, listening to the low hum of the shed's walls, to the soft rustling of wind pushing against the glass. Then the static rose again, louder, closer. My name once more, over and over. Each repetition faster, more urgent, like soft footsteps moving through deep fog, coming toward the shed. I swallowed hard. My fingers trembled on the edge of the table. The pale light above me flickered, buzzing low, as if reacting to the signal. Outside, the empty field stretched into darkness. No movement, no towers, no shadows tall enough to send anything through the air. Yet the radio called, and called. I reached the power switch, but froze when the static dropped suddenly into a single, long, dragging pulse. A final message, the longest one yet. I decoded it slowly, letter by letter, my chest tightening with each stroke of the pen. Behind you, the radio snapped to silence. A silence so deep it made my ears ring. I didn't turn. Couldn't. The cold brushed the back of my neck. Soft, like fingers made of fog. My breath stalled in my chest, caught between fear and something darker. I closed my eyes, listened to the quiet, listened for the next signal. But the radio stayed still, its face blank, its wires finally empty. Only the room breathed, only the cold lingered. And somewhere far across the valley, where the tower had once stood, the wind carried a faint hum, like static drifting through broken metal, calling a name that only I could hear. Early spring, cold dawnlight, a thin layer of fog sliding low across the field behind my house. I stepped outside each morning to the same quiet, the same pale sky, the same breath of damp air brushing against my face, and the same footprints, wet, bare, trailing through the dew-soaked grass, as if someone had walked from the far edge of the field straight toward my back door before the sun had fully risen. They always stopped at the mat, always pointed toward the house, always fresh. I would crouch low, fingers hovering just above them, feeling the chill in the air settle over my skin. The prints were never warm, never fading, never smeared, just there, waiting. I tried telling myself it was nothing, a prank, an animal, the shifting of the wet earth. But the shape was too clear. Toes, arches, heels pressing into the soft morning grass. Human. Some days the fog felt thicker around them, clinging to my ankles, curling over the edges of the prints as if trying to hide them. Other days, the air felt still and heavy and watching. I started waking earlier, hoping to catch whoever left them, hoping to see any shape moving across the field. But every morning was the same, a quiet hum of wind rustling the leaves, the smell of wet soil and pale light, and the fresh trail waiting for me. The dread grew slowly, threading itself through each sunrise. Until the morning, everything changed. That day, the air felt colder, sharper, as if the fog carried something inside it. I stepped onto the porch and froze. The footprints were there, but only halfway. They began at the far edge of the field, crossed the dew-drenched grass, reached the midpoint, and stopped. No fading, no turning away, just ending abruptly, mid-step, as if whoever walked had simply lifted out of the world. My breath caught in my throat. The fog pressed gently against my arms, like thin fingers brushing over my sleeves. The silence felt deeper than usual, heavier, a hollow kind of quiet that made the air ring. I backed toward the door, eyes locked on the half-finished trail, waiting for movement, waiting for anything. Nothing came. All day, the image burned in my mind. Those last prints, so dark with moisture, they almost shimmered against the pale grass. When night fell, I kept the backlights off. Some part of me felt it was safer not to be seen. The shadows outside were long and soft, stretching across the yard like thin arms. The hum of night air pushed against the windows, a low, steady breath. I sat in the kitchen, listening to the silence press itself against the house. And then a knock, a gentle one, right at the back door. My chest tightened, my hands froze on the table. Another knock, soft, slow, as if someone stood close enough to rest their forehead against the glass. I didn't move, didn't speak, barely breathed. There were no footprints tonight, no trail leading to the door, nothing to explain the weight behind the wood, only the knocking, steady as a heartbeat, trying to match my own. I whispered, without meaning to, "Go away!" The knocking stopped. Silence filled the house, thick, cold, almost buzzing in my ears. I waited, seconds stretching into something longer, something heavier. Then a faint drip struck the floor near the door. Another, and another. I forced myself to look. A thin line of dew slid under the doorframe, pooling on the kitchen tile. Clear, cold, fresh, like it had just been carried on the skin of someone standing outside. I stepped back. Another drip fell. My breath stilled. No shadow moved beneath the door. No footsteps walked away. The darkness outside remained still, as if holding its breath with me. I didn't open the door. I couldn't. I stayed awake until dawn, listening to nothing and everything at once. When the first light finally rose, I gathered my courage and opened the door a crack. The yard was quiet, fog drifting low, the field stretching into pale morning. And there, leading from the edge of the grass to the back porch, a full trail of footprints again, fresh, dark with dew, ending exactly where the knocking had been. I stared at them, feeling the cold curl around my ankles again. The field felt awake now, listening, waiting, and I knew the knocking would return, even if the footprints stopped halfway, or didn't appear at all. Something knew the way to my door, and it no longer needed to walk there. Late afternoon light, soft and pale, settled over the empty stretch of land behind the old service road. Dry weeds brushed my legs, their thin, rustling mixing with the low hum of distant insects and the faint smell of warm metal drifting through the air. I'd heard the rumors for years. A gate in the middle of nowhere. A place that didn't lead anywhere real. A place locals call the other field. Most people just laughed it off. But that day, walking alone under the cooling sky, curiosity pulled me farther down the dirt path than I usually went. The land opened suddenly flat and wide, as if someone had scraped the earth clean. And there it was, a rusted iron gate standing by itself, not connected to any fence, leaning slightly like it had been waiting a long, long time. No posts, no walls, just the gate and the field behind it. The metal was dark with aged orange flakes peeling like old skin, and the air around it felt still too still, like everything was holding its breath. I stepped closer. The smell of rust thickened, biting the back of my throat, and the late-day wind cooled against my face. My shadow stretched behind me long across the dirt, quietly attached to my every movement. I reached out my fingers, brushing the iron. The metal felt warm, almost soft under the layers of decay. I pushed. The hinge groaned a deep, strained sound, and the moment the gate opened, the wind died. Completely. No rustling grass. No insects. No movement in the air at all. Just silence, flat and heavy, pressing down against my skin. I took one step forward. Just one, and something felt wrong. The sun sat low behind me, thin light, stretching across the ground. I could feel the warmth of it on my back, a soft glow on my neck. But when I looked down, my shadow didn't follow. It stayed behind the gate, frozen against the dirt, still aligned with the closed shape, as if I hadn't moved at all. I lifted my hand. My real hand rose in front of me, but the shadow hand didn't lift. A cold breath rolled through my chest, slow, tight, as if the still air had slipped inside me. I stepped back quickly, heart rising to my throat, expecting my shadow to snap into place. But it didn't. It stayed where I'd stood before I crossed the threshold, stretched along the earth, exactly as it had been before the gate opened. I whispered to myself a small, trembling thought just to anchor myself to the moment. The silence answered thick, unmoving. I turned toward the field beyond the gate. It looked normal. Patches of grass, low weeds, a few scattered stones, nothing unusual. But the air inside felt heavier, like walking into a room that had been sealed too long. I reached my hand toward the sunlight, trying to catch any shift, any sign of a familiar shadow returning. Nothing. My skin prickled. My breath came shallow. Even the faintest breeze refused to touch the space around me. Behind me, the rusted gate stood open, a path back home, only a few steps away. I could have run, should have, but something in the stillness felt quietly patient, as if the field itself was waiting for me to choose. A strange calm washed over me. Not comfort, just acceptance, thin and cold, settling into my chest. I took one more step inside, and my shadow, still lying outside the gate, shifted. Only a little, just enough for the head to tilt, as if watching me leave it behind. The still air deepened, softening around my ears, until even my heartbeat sounded distant, muffled, like it was sinking into the ground. I knew then, without anyone telling me, that once you step through a place like this, you don't get everything back. Some things stay behind. Some things choose where they belong. I walked farther into the field of silence, wrapping around my shoulders like a thin, cool veil. The rusted gate creaked softly, but didn't close. Its simply weighted shadows stretched beneath it, unmoving. When I finally turned around, my shadow hadn't returned. It lay on the outside earth, calm, flat, still holding the shape of me, as if keeping watch. I breathed in the heavy air, accepting its weight, its strange quiet, its slow hum beneath the surface. And I kept walking into the other field, feeling less like I had lost something, and more like I had stepped into where it always wanted to go. Late autumn, cold mornings. A thin layer of fog sat low across the field behind my house, drifting like pale fabric over the grass. I walked out there every day, mostly to clear my head, mostly to feel alone in a safe way. But that morning, the ground pushed back against my steps. A soft lift, a slow fall, like something beneath the soil shifted with each bit of weight I put down. I froze. My breath left me in a faint cloud. The fog felt heavier around my legs, almost warm against the cold air. I stepped again. The earth pulsed under me, a dull rise, gentle and steady, almost like it was breathing. I listened. Still air, a low hum in the distance, a faint rustling in the grass nearby. But the ground kept moving. I knelt, pressing my palm to the soil. Moist dirt, cool blades of grass, and then that warm push of air rising toward my hand. A quiet exhale. My stomach tightened, but curiosity held me there longer than it should have. I pressed harder. The pulse grew warm, warm enough to fog the tips of my fingers. I whispered to myself, barely thinking, barely breathing, "Is something down there?" No answer, just a soft shifting, static in the back of my mind. The fog thickened around my knees as I dug my fingers into the dirt. It crumbled easily, too easily, like the soil wasn't really packed at all. I scraped away a thin layer and felt the ground dip beneath it, hollow, a thin crust of earth covering empty space. A faint draft brushed my skin, warm, damp, carrying the smell of clay and something sweet, like old fruit left too long in the sun. The earth beneath me inhaled again, slow, shuddering, alive. My throat tightened. Fear should have sent me running, but fascination pinned me there, hands trembling as I tore the soil aside bit by bit. The crust gave way. A tiny pocket opened in front of me, a dark cavity, no larger than my hand, gaped under the grass. Hot air drifted up from it. Not a burst, not a leak, a steady breath rising against the cold morning. I leaned closer. The warmth brushed my face, soft and rhythmic, almost human. Something inside the hollow shifted. A faint scrape, a slow twitch in the shadows. I jerked back. Mud clung to my palms. My heart thudded against my ribs like it wanted out. The fog swirled, wrapping around my shoulders as if urging me to leave. But I stayed. I stared into the hole, waiting, listening, feeling every beat of the ground's breath drift over my skin. Minutes passed, or maybe only seconds. The air around me felt thick, heavy, buzzing with static. Then the breathing stopped. Silence pulled tight around me. The air froze. Even the fog went still. I leaned closer again, unable to stop myself. The hollow looked darker now, deeper, as if the space below had widened without a sound. My fingertips brushed the edge. The soil crumbled away. A rush of hot air burst upward. A long, shaking exhale that hit me square in the chest and pushed me back. Not enough to knock me over, just enough to make me understand it wasn't accidental. I scrambled away on my hands, breath broken, mud streaking my sleeves. My knees sank into the wet grass as I stared at the widening hole. The warm air drifted upward again, but slower this time, measured, like it knew I was watching. The ground pulsed once more. A deep, slow inhale. The earth rose beneath me, lifting the soil around the hole in a shallow swell, as if something just beneath the surface pressed its face upward, close enough to touch the crust from the other side. I couldn't move. My breath rattled in my throat. My shadow trembled across the fog. The swell held there for a moment, perfectly still, listening. Then it sank back down, folding into silence. Cold wind swept across the field, rattling the dead leaves. The fog thinned. The breath vanished. The hollow lay open in front of me, dark and quiet and impossibly warm. I pushed myself to my feet, legs shaking, heart buzzing with fear that felt too old to name. I didn't fill the hole. I didn't cover it. I just stood there, watching the empty patch of earth breathe its last memory of warmth into the fading morning. I walked back to the house slowly, each step lighter, the ground no longer pulsing beneath me. But halfway to the porch, I felt the soil shift again. Just once. A soft rise. A slow exhale brushing the back of my ankles. I didn't turn around. The fog followed me to the door. Silence wrapped itself around the field behind me. And somewhere under that thin crust of earth, something waited to breathe again. Dusk settled slowly over the valley. The sky was pale pink, fading into gray, and the air carried a faint chill that made my breath curl in soft clouds. I wandered down the narrow path at the edge of the hollow, grass brushing against my ankles, the scent of damp earth heavy in the air. It had been quiet all afternoon, still, almost empty. Then I heard it, a faint ripple of sound, distant but clear. Laughter, children's laughter. I froze. The hollow stretched wide, empty fields around me, and I knew no one lived nearby. The nearest farmhouse was a mile away. The laughter was too bright, too close, to belong to anyone I could see. I stepped forward slowly. The blades of grass whispered beneath my shoes. Cool dew soaking through my socks. The sound grew, closer, ringing through the hollow like tiny bells. I knelt in the grass. The echoes danced across the field, shifting with every movement I made. It was playful, innocent, and yet the hollow held a strange stillness beneath it, like the world itself was listening. I took out my phone, pressed record. The laughter paused briefly, then resumed, weaving around me in spirals of sound. I could almost feel tiny hands brushing against my arms, cool fingertips brushing through the evening air. The sky deepened to soft gray. Shadows stretched long across the hollow. Every sound became sharper. The rustle of the grass, the hum of insects, the steady pulse of my own heartbeat. I walked slowly through the field, letting the laughter guide me, feeling the chill of damp grass on my knees, the fog curling over my ankles. And then I heard it, a soft, familiar note, not quite laughter, but a voice. I stopped, heart hammering. It wasn't a child's voice. It was mine. I stepped back and held the phone closer, listening to the playback. Each giggle, each soft step to the hollow, intertwined with my own voice, calling out in tones I hadn't made aloud. The air thickened around me. The fog rose, brushing over my shoulders, the hollow pressing in with the weight of silence. I whispered my name, and it echoed back, not in my voice, but in a chorus of voices layered together, too many to count, too close to ignore. The laughter didn't fade. It danced in the fog, circling me, brushing against my ears with a warmth of breath that was not mine. My hands trembled. The grass seemed to sway with a rhythm it shouldn't have. I turned slowly. Shadows stretched across the hollow, shapes bending in ways the light shouldn't allow. No one was there, only the echoing voices and the faint feeling of eyes on my back. I stepped backward. The laughter slowed, then paused, as if waiting. The fog rolled closer, damp against my cheeks, pressing me toward the path I had come from. The recording in my hand vibrated softly. I pressed play again. The children's voices rose, and mine was there too, layered perfectly, calling through the hollow, breathing into the fog, blending with something older, something that had been waiting. A soft wind rose across the field, carrying the laughter away. But the echo lingered in the damp air, curling around my feet, around my ears, pressing against the back of my neck. I walked back slowly, leaving the hollow behind. The mist clung to my ankles, the grass brushing softly. No footsteps followed. No shadows moved, but the laughter stayed, low, faint, just at the edge of hearing, waiting, tangled with my voice. Always there in the hollow in the fog, beneath the pale light of dusk. Late summer. The air was warm but heavy, thick with the scent of dry grass and earth baking under the sun. I walked across the empty field, feet sinking slightly into soft soil, a faint rustle of dry stems brushing my ankles. The horizon stretched wide, pale and empty. No houses, no roads, nothing but a single tree, standing alone, its twisted branches dark against the fading light. I had passed it countless times, always from a distance, always curious, always hesitant. That night, the wind dropped. The air pressed still and quiet. Even the insects seemed to hold their breath. And then I heard it, a low hum, soft, static-like, vibrating through the soles of my shoes, through the thin air, through the quiet night. It came from the tree, or from the air around it. I could feel it before I could see it. The branches swayed gently in the absence of wind, their shadows crawling across the grass like slow-moving fingers. The smell of warm bark and dust clung to the night, making each breath taste thick. I approached slowly, every step measured. The hum rose slightly as I neared, subtle, rhythmic, like a living pulse. My hand hovered just above the rough bark, cold, yet faintly warm beneath my fingers, like the tree had been holding heat for decades and was now offering it reluctantly. I pressed my palm against it. The hum intensified. A vibration ran up my arm, settling in my chest, matching the rhythm of my own heartbeat. And then I heard voices, soft, distant, through the static. Faint words carried on a thin, electric thread, calling out, calling for help. I pressed closer, leaning into the tree. The voices grew louder, clearer. snatches of conversation, urgent tones overlaid with static. I could almost recognize the timbre, human, desperate, isolated. The field seemed to close around me. The shadows of the trees stretched and shifted. The grass whispered under unseen movements. My own breathing sounded loud against the night, sharp against the deep hum. I stepped back slightly. The voices didn't fade. They layered, repeated, circling in the still air, as if the tree had become a conduit for something long lost and forgotten. The hum vibrated beneath my feet now, rippling through the soil. The scent of ozone and warm bark filled my nose, thickening the quiet night around me. Every instinct urged me to leave, but fascination pinned me there, hands trembling against the rough bark. A single branch shifted closer to my face, and a soft whisper seemed to brush past my ear. Just a fragment, a syllable too fleeting to understand fully, but it carried meaning. A plea, a warning. I leaned away slowly, heart thrumming against my ribs. The static pulsed in time with my heartbeat, and the voices receded only slightly, echoing to the hollow of the tree, bouncing across the field, wrapping the night around me. The horizon darkened further. The wind remained absent. The lone tree stood rigid, its branches swaying almost imperceptibly, as if aware of every motion I made. Its hum softened, like a sigh settling into the soil. I finally let go. My hand slid from the bark. The vibration waned, but the hum lingered, soft and distant, like something breathing beneath the field itself. I stepped back into the open, grass bent under my feet. The air was thick with static and the scent of bark and earth. The voices faded into echoes, but I could still feel their presence, woven into the quiet of the night. The tree remained, silent yet alive, a sentinel in the empty field, holding the static and the voices close, and watching as I walked away, alone. The night wrapped itself around the field, cold and quiet, but the hum lingered beneath my skin, a pulse beneath the soil, a voice calling softly through the darkness. Late autumn evening. The fog hung low, thick and wet, curling over the field like pale silk. I walked toward the old barn, feet sinking into soft mud, the cold, damp air pressing against my face. The barn sat alone, its wood gray and weathered, doors sagging on rusted hinges. A single window faced the open field, but beyond it, nothing, only fog, dense and unbroken. I climbed the rickety ladder slowly, handholds rough against my palms, each rung creaking under my weight. The wind whispered through the slats, soft as breath, rustling against my jacket. The smell of dry hay mixed with wet wood, and the faint tang of decay. At the top, I reached the window. Cold glass pressed against my fingers. I leaned forward to peer through. The fog stretched endlessly, white and thick, swallowing the field in quiet. Nothing moved, no shapes, no sound. Then I saw it, a face, pale, still, framed in the fog, eyes fixed directly on mine, unblinking, unmoving. I jerked back slightly. The air caught in my throat, warm against the chill, as if the fog itself held its breath. I leaned again. The figure didn't waver. It mirrored me perfectly, or perhaps I mirrored it. The window became a thin barrier between me and something impossible. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, soft and insistent, matching the faint hum of the barn settling around me. I wanted to move, to climb down, but my feet were rooted. The cold glass pressed against my palms, warm from inside me rising up to meet it. A soft rustle came from below, the floorboards shifting under their own weight. Yet no one was there, only the fog beyond the window, and the face that waited silently. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time felt slowed, stretched thin. The fog remained still. The eyes remained fixed. And I felt the quiet settle into my chest, a heavy, pressing calm. I lowered myself gently, back down the ladder, every step careful, deliberate. The cold night air pressed closer, fog curling around my ankles, soft against my skin. By the time I reached the ground, the barn creaked behind me, and the window reflected only the pale light of dusk. No face, no movement, just the fog swelling and shifting, as if nothing had ever looked back at me. I walked away slowly, mud squelching beneath my boots, the silence of the field wrapping around me. Sometimes at night, when the wind is still and the fog lies heavy over the grass, I feel a gaze from the barn window pressing softly against my back, and the world goes quiet. Everything waits. Late summer nights. The air was soft and still, thick with the scent of dry grass and earth cooling after the sun had left. From my window, I watched the field beyond the house. Shadows stretched long, curling over the tall weeds. A faint fog lay close to the ground, touching the soil with cold fingertips. And every night, the light appeared, a pale glow in the distance, soft and warm against the darkness. It moved slowly, almost floating, growing closer, then fading slightly, as if breathing with the night itself. I would step onto the porch, feet pressing against the rough boards, cool wind brushing against my cheeks. The glow shifted toward me, then vanished at the edges of the field, absorbed by the dark, leaving only the smell of damp earth and the hum of quiet air. I waited. Each night, the same rhythm, calm, expectation, a gentle tug at the edges of my mind. One evening, the fog was thicker. The air smelled faintly of smoke and grass. The light appeared again, distant but insistent. I leaned forward, pressing my hands to the railing, heart echoing the soft pulse of the glow. It moved closer, slower than before, and I felt a strange warmth brush across my skin. And then nothing. The light faded into black of the field. Not at the edges, not vanishing like before. It was gone. I stepped back, cold settling into my chest, the wind still, the field silent. Inside the house, the floorboards creaked under my careful steps. The air smelled faintly of old wood and dust. I moved toward the living room, eyes tracing shadows in the corners, listening to hum of the night pressing against the windows. A knock came, soft, slow, echoing from inside the walls, or perhaps the ceiling, not loud enough to startle, but deliberate. I froze, breath caught in my throat, the house pressing around me, each shadow deeper, heavier. The air smelled faintly of the field, damp and earthy, carrying a memory of the vanished light. Another knock, closer, from the wall, beside me this time. Faint vibrations through my fingertips as I rested my hand against the surface. I could feel it, something waiting, not outside, but here, inside, pressing against the calm air, bending it with expectation. I leaned toward the sound. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, like fog pressing against my skin. No wind moved through the house. No light touched the corners. Only the faint, soft knocking and the memory of the glow that had vanished from the field. I took a slow step back. The knocks paused. The air held its breath. The shadows hung perfectly still, as if the house itself were listening. I didn't move, couldn't move. The memory of the light remained in my chest, a warmth fading against the cold. And the knocking waited. Outside, the field remained dark, empty of glow, empty of movement. Inside, the house held a quiet dread, soft and patient, pressing close like the fog beyond the windows. I sank into the nearest chair, hands pressed to my knees, breath shallow. The knocking had stopped, but the expectation lingered, thick in the air, waiting to return with the next night, or perhaps never at all. Late summer evening. The sun had slipped behind the horizon, and the cornfield stretched wide, rustling softly in the warm wind. I stepped into the rows, boots sinking slightly in the damp soil. The stalks pressed against my arms, the faint scent of earth and drying leaves filling my nose. Then I heard it, a soft whistle, threading through the corn, slipping past the tips of the leaves, light and distant. Curiosity drew me forward, each step quiet, careful, the stalks brushing against my legs like restless fingers. The whistle lingered a few rows ahead, then faded, yet the air felt charged with it. I followed. It seemed always just out of reach, moving ahead faster than I could, yet never disappearing completely. The sound twisted to the field, soft, constant, impossible to locate. A fog had begun to settle, cool and damp, curling around my ankles, softened the edges of the corn. The whistle grew sharper, closer. The air smelled faintly of wet earth and husks, electric with quiet tension. I quickened my pace. The rows bent and twisted in strange patterns, long shadows stretching and shifting with the dim light. The whistle now seemed to circle me, close enough to touch, then slipping away when I reached forward. Then it stopped, abrupt, Silent. The field pressed around me. No wind. No movement but the stalks brushing softly against each other. A breath. My heartbeat. Then behind me, the whistle returned. Closer. Direct. Cold fingers of panic wrapped around my chest. I turned slowly. Nothing. The fog thickened. Each step back felt heavier. Grass and soil soft beneath my boots. The scent of damp husks clinging to my clothes. I moved forward again. Tried to follow the invisible path. The whistle leading and mocking at once. I could feel it just a few rows ahead. Then behind, a shadow in the corner of my vision. I stopped. The whistle vanished again. Silence pressed in, dense, suffocating. The corn swayed lightly in the wind that wasn't there. Shadows seemed to stretch longer, bending unnaturally toward me. A faint rustle behind. I spun, heart hammering. Empty rows. Nothing but fog and stalks. The whistle returned, faint and playful, circling around me, tugging at the edges of fear. I stepped forward, then backward, never sure if I was gaining or being drawn deeper. The field seemed endless now, the fog heavier, cold against my skin, the damp scent of soil and corn choking the air. Every step brought only uncertainty. Every pause filled with the memory of that sound, close, then impossibly far. I turned again. The rows were the same, yet subtly different, like the field had shifted while I wasn't watching. The whistle stopped, lingering in the silence, and I realized I wasn't alone in my dread. A final soft whistle. Right behind me, and the hairs on my neck stood. I ran. The stalks lashed against my arms, the mud sucking at my boots, the fog swallowing the field, and the sound together. When I reached the edge, breath ragged, heart hammering, the cornfield lay still behind me. No sound, no light, only the memory of the whistle and the feeling of something waiting just beyond the rows and the fog, and always a step behind. Late autumn afternoon. The field stretched endless, pale under a lowering sky. Damp grass pressed against my boots, and the air smelled faintly of wet earth and dying leaves. I noticed it from the path. A mirror, standing alone, its silver frame darkened with age. It seemed impossible, suddenly there, yet not out of place, as if it had always been waiting. I approached slowly. The air pressed close, still and cold. The fog drifted low, curling around my ankles, soft, whispering against the soles of my shoes. The mirror reflected everything. The field, the sky, the distant trees shivering in the wind. But not me. I stepped closer, hand hovering above the glass. My reflection should have been there, the warmth of my own body pressed against my arm. But in the mirror, only the empty field stretched back. The fog within the reflection began to shift, slowly, like a current under still water, moving with intent, curling around unseen shapes. The air smelled colder now, like frost mixing with damp earth. I leaned forward, curiosity brushing against unease. The reflected fog thickened, swirling around a dark, indistinct form. Shadows seemed to stretch toward me, slithering along the glass surface, always just beyond clarity. I stepped back slightly. The silence pressing thick and dense, the rustle of grass distant and hollow. I could feel my breath in my ears, hot against the chill of the evening. The movement inside the mirror grew deliberate. A pale light shimmered faintly within the fog, revealing hints of shapes, perhaps figures, perhaps nothing but shadow. The glass pulsed faintly under my fingertips, cool yet vibrating softly, like it was alive beneath my touch. I tried to look away, but the mirror held me, pulling my gaze back. Each movement in the reflection echoed the field, yet twisted, strange, not quite right. It felt like being watched from a place that was here, and also somewhere else entirely. A soft rustle came from behind me. I spun. Empty field. The fog curled at the edges, still and calm, but the mirror continued to move, its reflection alive in a way the world was not. I pressed my palm to the glass again. A warmth met me, soft and unnatural, and I could see the fog swirling faster, tighter, as if breathing around something hidden. I stepped back, heart slow, careful, breathing shallow in the cold air. The field was quiet, the wind absent, and yet the mirror remained, its fog moving, unseen by the world, alone with me, holding its secret in stillness. I finally tore my eyes away. The mirror stood in the field, dark frame catching the pale light, fog swirling inside, waiting, always waiting. I walked away slowly, boots wet with dew, the air thick with silence, and the image of that moving fog etched behind my eyelids. Even now I can feel it, the soft pull of the glass, the weight of the stillness, and the quiet knowledge that it watches, even when I do not. Late autumn afternoon, the field stretched empty and still, the tall grass brushing softly against my legs. A damp scent of soil and fallen leaves clung to the air, and the wind whispered faintly through the stalks. I had brought my recorder, a small, unassuming device meant to capture the quiet of this place. I placed it among the grass, the microphone peeking above the blades, and pressed record. For hours, nothing. The hum of the wind, the rustle of dry stalks, the faint static of the machine itself. Silence held the field, thick, calm, almost tangible. I wandered slowly, feet sinking into soft soil, eyes tracing the faint movements of the fog curling low across the ground. I felt alone, yet the stillness had a presence, like a quiet listener pressed against the air. When I returned to the recorder, the hours of playback seemed empty. Soft static hummed, intermittent pops and clicks, but no voices. Curiosity made me lean closer. I scrubbed the recording slowly, tracking the long stretches of quiet. When I noticed it, a faint cry, buried under the static, soft, barely there, and yet unmistakable. The tone, the rhythm, sent a shiver down my spine. I froze. The cry had a familiarity. It carried the shape of my own voice. Impossible. I had only just arrived. The field seemed to close around me. The fog thickened, cold tendrils brushing against my ankles. Every breath felt heavier, as if inhaling the weight of the past. I listened again. The crying repeated, layered beneath the static. It was my voice, echoing through time, recorded before I had stepped into the field. I pressed pause. The silence returned, thick and suffocating. The faint smell of damp grass and earth filled my nostrils, and I could hear my own heartbeat mirroring the rhythm of the recorded sobs. I touched the recorder. The plastic felt cool against my fingers. The static hummed softly, like a living thing, an echo trapped and waiting. The realization pressed against me. I had captured myself crying before I had even arrived. Time folded in the quiet field, stretching, bending. The stillness seemed to lean closer, watching, listening, holding its breath. I stepped back. Grass brushed against my arms. Leaves crackled underfoot. The fog drifted, curling through the air, soft, patient, unyielding. I played the recording once more. The cry beneath the static was clearer now. Each breath, each sob, a whisper I could not ignore. It was me, and yet not. The wind shifted. A faint hum rose from the recorder, melding with the rustling stalks around me. I could feel the field leaning closer, expectant, patient, holding the memory of the sound in its grasp. I left the recorder there, walked back through the fog, saw footsteps press against cold, wet soil. The cries lingered in my mind, a quiet echo threading through the stillness of the evening. Even now, when I think of that field, I hear it beneath the silence, soft, impossible, and always mine. Waiting, late autumn evening. The wind was still, the air thick with fog curling along the fence posts. Damp grass brushed my ankles, smelling faintly of wet earth and drying leaves. It appeared the first night, just beyond the split-rail fence. A figure, wrapped in white cloth, unmoving, silent, standing as though it had grown from the earth itself. I froze. The air pressed close, breath catching in my chest, and the faint rustle of grass sounded louder than it should. Its cloth fluttered faintly in the wind, but it did not shift, did not blink, did not breathe. I stepped closer, each footfall soft against the damp soil, the fog curling around my legs like cold fingers. The figure did not move. I reached out, and when I opened my eyes fully, it was gone. Nothing but fog and the faint scent of earth remained. A silence pressed in, dense and heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. I returned inside that night. The bed felt colder than usual, the wind brushing against the windows softly. But the house was empty. I fell asleep with a sense of unease crawling under my skin. Morning came. The sunlight barely filtered through the mist outside. On the floor near my bed, Footprints pressed into the damp wood. They circled, slow and deliberate, too small to be mine, too heavy to belong to a bird or animal. I traced them with my fingers. The smell of wet earth clung faintly to the grooves. I could still feel the chill from the night, the presence of something that had been near, watching, patient, unblinking. That night it returned, the white figure by the fence, silent, pale against the darkening fog. I approached again. The fog shifted, cold mist curling around my face, and the figure vanished. I stayed inside. Windows shut, doors locked, yet when I woke, the footprints were back, circling my bed once more. The faint scent of damp soil lingered. The sense of being observed was stronger, heavier, pressing down like the fog itself. Night after night, the figure appeared, always still, always just beyond reach. I approached each time, and each time it vanished before I could touch it. The fog followed me inside. Soft whispers, almost imagined, brushed against my ears. The cloth seemed to float across the fence, its movement impossible, its intent unknowable. I learned to sleep lightly. The footprints never stopped. Each morning, circling my bed, pressing their presence into floor, a reminder of helplessness, of being watched, of something patient and eternal outside the safety of walls. Even now, I can feel it lingering in the air, the cold weight of fog and soil, the whisper of cloth against the wind, and the knowledge that it waits, just beyond the fence, silent and unwavering. Night fell with a hush. The air was damp and heavy, carrying the faint smell of wet earth and decaying leaves. I watched from the porch as the fog began its crawl, rolling slowly across the fields, thick and silent. It always stopped at the edge of my property, as if respecting some unseen boundary. The grass bent beneath its weight, and the world beyond shimmered, blurred in pale gray. Curiosity pulled me forward. I stepped off the porch, feet sinking slightly into the damp soil. The fog welcomed me with a cold brush, sliding over my skin like fingers of mist. The scent of wet grass and soil grew sharper, sharp and damp in my nose. Then I heard it, a whisper carried on the wind, soft, intimate. My name, spoken slowly, drawn out like the fog itself was learning it, repeating it, inviting me. I froze. The world around me narrowed to the fog and the whisper. Rustling stalks of grass seemed louder now, each breath a small gasp. The fog twisted and curled, shifting as if alive, holding a patient, waiting presence. I took another step. The mist rose higher, coiling around my legs, wet and cold, clinging to my skin. The whisper came again, closer, almost behind me. I turned slowly. Nothing, only the fog, thick and trembling in the faint light. Each step felt slower, the earth sucking at my boots. I could hear my own heartbeat, matching the rhythm of the whisper. It spoke my name, again and again, soft and breathy, insistent, patient. I wanted to retreat, but something kept me there. The fog seemed to press against me, encouraging, coaxing. I reached out a hand, touching the gray swirl. It was wet, cold, alive. A faint hum vibrated through it, like it was breathing. The whispers grew louder, layered now, overlapping, some tones familiar, some alien. The fog shifted, curled higher, and I could feel it moving with intention, aware of me, waiting. My skin prickled. The air felt thick with silence between the whispers, dense and waiting. I could smell damp leaves, wet soil, and something faintly metallic like iron. The world narrowed to the fog in my breath, and I realized it was not just fog. It watched. It knew. I stumbled back. The boundary of my property drew closer, the fog hesitating at the edge once more. The whisper lingered, soft, as if it didn't want me to leave. Every hair on my arm stood up, and I could feel the fog curling around my legs, gentle, patient, insistent. I stepped onto the porch. The fog retreated instantly, rolling back to the fields, leaving the night calm once more. The whispers faded, leaving only silence and the lingering scent of wet earth and cold mist. Even now I can feel it waiting at the edge of the fields, where the fog always stops, patient, silent, and whispering my name. The night was quiet. A pale moon hung over the field, casting long, thin shadows across the grass. The air smelled of damp stone and cold earth. I walked slowly, boots crunching on frost-tipped weeds, drawn toward the old well at the edge of clearing. It had stood there for decades, a circle of gray stone, worn smooth by rain and wind. No rope, no bucket, just a hollow black that seemed to breathe in the darkness. The fog drifted low tonight, wrapping the well in a soft, gray shawl. I leaned closer. At first, there was nothing, only the wind twisting through the cracks and the faint hum of night insects. Then a sound, a voice, barely more than a murmur, folded into the stones. I froze. It repeated a sentence I had thought forgotten, a memory buried so deep I had never spoken aloud. The smell of wet stone pressed to my nose, and the cold seeped through my jacket sleeves, curling up my arms. The voice grew clearer. Not one, but many, echoes of my own thoughts, my own memories, layered and warped, folded into the hollow dark. It spoke of small things, things no one had ever known. The fear of being alone, the secret wish I had whispered to myself at dawn. I wanted to step back, but my feet stayed rooted. The fog swirled at my ankles, soft and persistent. A rustling from the nearby trees made me glance up, but nothing moved. Only the well and the voices, my voices, repeating themselves like whispers caught in stone. The air seemed to pulse with each echo. I could feel it vibrating beneath my hands. The stones warm and cold at the same time, alive with the memory of me. The fog clung tighter, and the faint metallic tang of something old and wet filled my senses. I shivered, but I could not tear my eyes away from the hollow. The memories grew darker. Shame, fear, loneliness, all the small moments I had tucked away. They seeped out now, twisting into whispers, breathing back at me from the depths of the well. My heartbeat matched the rhythm of the echoes, a slow, careful drum beneath the night. I took a tentative step closer. The fog moved with me, sliding over my boots like liquid silk. The voices leaned in, folding around my thoughts, mirroring me perfectly. Each echo carried a weight I had not expected, as if the well had waited for me, knowing, always knowing. I pressed my hand against the cold stone. It hummed softly under my palm, vibrating with the murmurs of my own past. A faint smell of wet earth and old moss filled my nose, layered with a subtle tang of something more ancient, older than the land itself. The voices softened, shifting from fear to something quieter, gentle, reflective, watchful. I stepped back finally. The fog pulled away, leaving the night still and empty. The well lay silent, its stones gray and unmoving, but I knew it remembered everything. I could feel in my chest, in the slow, soft echo of my own breath, and in the quiet tremble of the air around me. I walked home slowly, each step sinking slightly into the frosted grass. The voices did not follow, but the memory of them lingered, a soft, constant hum beneath my skin. The well waited still at the edge of the field, patient, silent, and I understood I would never be alone again. The night was heavy with the scent of earth and dry corn husks. The harvest moon hung full and low, casting an orange glow that seeped through the fog. The field was quiet, yet the air felt thick, as if it were holding its breath with me. I stepped carefully between the rows, feet crunching over brittle stalks. The wind stirred the leaves, a whisper of movement brushing against my skin, but something else lingered, still and watching. Then I saw them, eyes, countless eyes, glowing faint amber between the stalks. They blinked once. I held my breath. They blinked again, perfectly in sync. A hum rose in my chest, matching the rhythm of my own pulse. Every inhale, every exhale, the eyes mirrored me. It was not just a field. It was aware, breathing. I stepped forward, each foot heavy against the dry soil. The stalks rustled around me, the fog clinging to my jacket sleeves, the faint metallic tang of the earth pressing into my nose. The eyes blinked again, and I realized they did not just watch. They waited for me. I tried to count them, but there were too many, stretching on endlessly into the fog. Some perched low, some high, all glowing softly, blinking with that same rhythm. I could hear the faintest murmur beneath the rustling stalks, like whispers carried through the soil. Too quiet to understand. The air grew colder. My breath came out in small, shaky clouds, and with each exhale, the blinking intensified. It was hypnotic. I wanted to turn to run, but my legs would not obey. Only the eyes and the soft, pulsing hum of awareness that filled the field. I crouched, trying to make myself smaller, but the eyes only shifted with me. Every blink, every movement, a mirror to my own rhythm. I could feel the wetness of dew on the ground, the static of the fog on my skin, the silence stretching and bending around me. Time lost meaning. I did not know if I had been there seconds or hours. The moon hung heavy overhead, its light painting the stalks in orange and shadow, and the eyes continued to watch, unceasing, patient, relentless. I forced myself to step back, stalks brushing against my hands, the dampness clinging to my fingertips. The blinking followed. The hum in my chest grew louder, as if the field had made me a part of its rhythm. I could not leave yet. Or perhaps I did not want to. The fog thickened, swallowing the far edges of the field. The eyes blinked slower now, more deliberate. A hush fell over everything, the rustling stalks, the distant trees, even my own breath. Everything stilled into a single, suspended moment. I sank to the ground, hands pressed into the damp soil, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath me, the faint warmth of life hidden inside the cold ground. The eyes hovered, unblinking now, a quiet promise of presence, and I realized I was not alone. The moonlight faded behind a curtain of fog. The eyes did not vanish. They lingered dim and patient, and I felt a strange calm settle over me, a quiet acceptance of the watching, of the blinking, of the field that had waited all this time. I rose slowly, feet sinking into the soft earth. The stalks whispered against my legs, and I turned back toward home. The eyes remained, and I knew they would wait for the next harvest moon, for the next breath, for the next heartbeat to mirror. I left the field, the fog curling around my shoulders, and the silent hum followed me a little way, like a heartbeat I could feel beneath my own skin. And then quiet, only the memory of amber eyes, blinking in unison, in the stillness of the harvest night. The fog had settled thick over the field, clinging to the earth like a damp blanket. The smell of wet soil and rot hung heavy. I walked slowly, boots sinking into the softened ground, the mist curling around my legs, wrapping me in quiet, almost unnatural silence. At first, there was nothing, just the skeletal remains of what had once been a farmhouse, charred timbers and splintered boards poking through the weeds. But each night I noticed something, a wall here, a roof there, shapes assembling the fog like memories remembered too clearly. The second night, the doorway appeared, timber stacked straight and true, but still empty, still cold. I pressed my hand against the damp wood, felt the faint warmth beneath the surface, like the house itself was breathing, waiting. The fog shifted, soft footsteps of wind stirring the tall grass. I could smell smoke and faded paint, a hint of meals long since cooked, and laughter faintly echoing, or perhaps imagined. Each step toward the house made the air denser. Each breath tasted of damp wood and time. By the third night, the windows had returned, glass glinting faintly in the pale moonlight, reflecting nothing but fog. I peered through one, saw shadows flicker, furniture that smelled of old varnish and dust, the faint hum of a clock that had never existed. I wanted to look away, but my body was rooted in the cold earth, curious beyond fear. The fourth night, the house felt almost alive, walls straight, roof unbroken, chimney standing like a sentinel in the mist. The door moved slightly, as if the house were breathing through its frame. I could hear my own pulse, matching some slow rhythm that the fog seemed to whisper. Something was waiting inside. The nights passed, and each time I came, the house was more complete. Paint returned to the siding. Flowers bloomed faintly in the yard. A scent of damp linen drifted through the air. And then, finally, on the night when the fog hung heaviest, I saw them, a family, standing at the window, not moving, yet unmistakably there. The mother, the father, children peering out with eyes wide, pale faces framed in shadow. I could hear nothing, yet the silence pressed against my ears like a hand. The fog swallowed my words before they could escape my lips. I stepped closer, feet wet with dew, hands brushing the cold mist, heart hammering in my chest. The house did not acknowledge me. The family did not move. It was not anger, not fear, just a presence, and it filled the air like a weight, dense, inescapable. I wanted to call out, to break the quiet, but the fog muffled my voice, the walls absorbed it, and the family remained still, watching, waiting. I circled the house, touching the damp wood, feeling its pulse beneath my fingers. Cold yet strangely alive. The grass whispered under my steps, and a soft hum rose from the earth, low and constant, as if the ground itself remembered. The last night, the house was whole. Every window, every board, every shadow in place. The fog had settled like a shroud, and the family, still there, faces pressed to glass, watching through the haze. I did not move. I could not move. I breathed in the damp air, felt the chill in my lungs, and the silence settled over me like an old friend. The house, the fog, the family, all a single, waiting thing. I stepped back, letting the mist curl around me once more, and turned away slowly. The farmhouse remained behind me, complete, whole, as if it had never been destroyed. And I knew it would wait and watch and never forget. The evening was soft and still, the sky pale with the last traces of sunset. The air smelled faintly of wet leaves, and the ground pressed cool beneath my boots. I walked along the path behind the house, each step careful, quiet, alone. At first, I noticed nothing unusual, only the long stretch of shadows stretching across the grass, leaning, bending with the contours of my body. But then a twitch, a movement that didn't quite match. I stopped. The shadow kept moving. A heartbeat behind me, lagging. My arm lifted, slowly, cautiously, and the dark figure hesitated, a second too late, a fraction of breath, slower than mine. I walked again. The sun had fully vanished. The wind stirred the trees with a dry rustle, leaves brushing my skin, the cold brushing through my shirt. And the shadow followed, always behind, always late. I paused at the fence, though it smelled damp, splintered where it had aged in silence. I raised my foot to step over, and the shadow remained, frozen, then bent where I had just moved. It mimicked, but always a heartbeat too slow. The feeling settled deep in my chest. A hollow, quiet dread. I could hear my own breathing, rapid now, but not quite matching the steady, slow exhale behind me. The shadow, it breathed that I stepped closer, wanted to confront it, to look into the dark where my face should be reflected. The grass whispered beneath my hands as I touched it, cool and wet, and then I reached the light from the porch. The shadow paused, completely still, except for its breath out a faint rustle, like fabric brushing against wood. Slow, deliberate, not mine. The air felt heavier here, dense with silence. And the shadow remained, empty yet alive, a presence folded into the night. I circled slowly, watching for movement, but the darkness clung to ground, watching me in return. The cold seeped into my bones, the wind carrying faint smells of smoke and soil. Every step made the shadow lag further, yet its breathing never faltered. I wanted to speak, to shatter the quiet, but words caught in my throat. The shadow's chest rose slightly with each exhale, steady calm. It did not imitate my voice, did not respond. It only was that I crouched in the grass, hands pressing into the wet soil, breath misting in the cold night air. The shadow leaned against my absence, a dark echo of my shape, and I realized that it did not belong to me. Not fully that I stood, footsteps soft on damp earth. The shadow followed, yet remained hesitant, like a living thing learning its own existence. Its breath stirred the air, humid and slightly metallic, touching my skin with the weight of its presence. Hours passed in slow circles. The moon rose pale and distant, casting silver over the trees. I could feel the shadow's gaze, though it had no eyes. It did not speak, did not move beyond its shape. It simply breathed. When I finally stepped into the porch light, it froze entirely. No lag, no twitch, only the soft rise and fall of the darkness where my body should be mirrored. The air smelled of wetwood, cold stone, and something waiting. I backed away slowly, leaving it at the edge of the lamplight, its presence pressing against the night like a weight I could not lift. The shadow did not follow. It did not disappear. It only breathed, patient, eternal, and I understood that some things were meant to linger behind us, even when we moved forward. I turned toward the house, feet heavy in the grass, breath shallow, and the shadow stayed behind, still, quiet, a dark companion waiting for its own time. The field stretched beyond the horizon, fog rolling low over the wet earth, each stalk of grass trembling in the pale moonlight. The air was heavy, damp, smelling of soil and something faintly metallic. I walked slowly, boots sinking into soft mud, listening. My name came first, a soft whisper, slipping between the rustling blades. I stopped. The sound drifted away with the wind, then returned, closer this time, again calling me, my own voice or something like it. I knelt, fingers brushing wet grass, leaning close to the earth. It whispered again, soft, almost intimate. I could feel the vibrations through my fingertips, cool, alive, trembling. I set the recorder down, hoping to capture the sound, the way it lingered in the night. The night deepened, shadows thickened between the stalks, and the wind shifted. My name repeated, then another word followed, slipping past comprehension. Behind! I froze. The hairs on my arms prickled with chill. The wind carried the sound, rustling past my ears, pressing against my neck. I replayed the recording. The familiar whisper of my own name filled my headphones. But then, a voice I didn't recognize, low, urgent, almost cruel, saying, "Behind you." My breath caught. The field seemed to close in, each stalk brushing against my skin, wet and cold. The ground smelled richer somehow, darker, heavier. I turned slowly, feet sinking quietly into mud, but nothing moved. The fog shifted, curling like smoke around my legs, and the whispers continued, never my voice, never fully mine. I stepped forward. The grass pressed against my calves, wet, soft, alive. The whisper repeated my name, then paused, as if listening. And then it spoke again, short, deliberate, "Behind you." I spun, empty air, silence that hummed against my eardrums. Only the wind moved, carrying the faint smell of damp earth and something deeper, older, unplaceable. My heart beat against the hollow space in my chest, each pulse echoing in the fog. I crouched, pressed hands to knees, tracing the edge of the recorder with cold fingers. The whisper returned, sliding across the field, layered with the sound of my own voice, warped, twisted, unfamiliar. The grass quivered with it. The wind answered in static hums, tiny motions that felt deliberate. I rose slowly, trying not to make a sound. The voice came again, so soft it seemed impossible, yet sharp enough to make my skin crawl. "Behind you." I shivered. I could almost feel it, a presence lingering just out of sight, pressing against the fog, watching, waiting. The recorder slipped from my hand. I caught it before it hit the ground, breath misting wet in the cold night air. I replayed it again. The whisper carried, faint but insistent, a low murmur curling around my ears, something unnatural beneath the familiar tone. It wasn't just calling my name. It was summoning me. I stepped back. The field seemed endless, fog curling, rustling, alive. Every stalk of grass trembled. Every shadow shifted in subtle, impossible ways. I could feel eyes on me, though nothing visible moved. The air smelled damp, iron-rich, and every breath was a reminder that I was alone, yet not. I turned toward the faint light of the farmhouse, every step careful, slow, deliberate. The whisper followed, sliding along the wind, through the grass, carrying my name, then curling behind it the single word, "Behind you." I kept walking. The fog closed around me like a soft shroud, and the whisper lingered in the distance, never letting go, pressing against the back of my mind. The night held me in its quiet, and I realized some sounds are never meant to be answered. Some voices wait in the dark, patient, and always behind you. The fog had returned, thick, damp, and still. It rolled over the field in slow waves, coating the ground with a wet hush. Each step sank softly into the mud, boots heavy, soaked. I had been walking for hours, hours that felt like days. The horizon never shifted. The same open field stretched in every direction, grass bending with the weight of moisture, shadows pooling in the pale light. The air smelled of wet earth and something else, metallic, faint, like a memory pressing against the back of my throat. I breathed in, slow, careful, hoping for a hint of change, but there was none. Then, through the mist, I saw it. My cabin, windows aglow with warm, yellow light, a small beacon in the endless gray. I squinted, every nerve taut, the fog curling around me, resisting. I approached slowly, each step soft against the wet grass, listening to the silence, to the subtle rustle of fog-drenched leaves. There was a hum now, a vibration underfoot, or maybe just a quiet pressing too close. The cabin appeared closer, and yet the field never seemed to end. Every step forward returned me to the same stretch of grass, the same smell of damp soil, the same stagnant air pressing against my skin. The lights in the cabin were steady, pale through the fog. The window open, and someone was inside, a figure hunched over a small device, hands trembling, recording. I stopped, my heart beat against my chest. Soft footsteps forgotten. The wind shifted slightly, whispering to the grass, rustling across my skin. The figure raised their head just enough to catch my silhouette. They did not move, did not speak. I stepped closer, fog swirling around ankles, wet and cold. The air smelled richer now, darker, pressed with the weight of long hours, like the field itself had grown aware of me. I realized it had been waiting. The figure inside, their face hidden, the recorder humming softly, was me, or some version I could not name. Every movement mirrored, every breath echoed in the fog. The field had circled back, folded in on itself, trapping me in repetition, in stillness. I wanted to speak, to call out, but my voice was swallowed, drifting into the damp night. The fog shifted again, and the cabin stayed the same. Window open, lights warm, inviting, yet unreachable. I reached for the door. My hand trembled against the frame. Cold moisture soaking the sleeve of my coat. I could feel the hum of the recorder inside, a soft, pulsing vibration. The field held me in its endless loop, and I understood the journey had no end. I sank to grass, boots wet, watching the figure through the window. Each breath I drew echoed back at me, soft, distorted, like a memory not my own. The fog whispered along the ground, curled around my knees, and in that quiet I felt the field's presence, vast, patient, unyielding. Hours passed, or maybe seconds. Time had no meaning here. The lights flickered once, and the figure inside lifted the recorder slightly, pointed it toward me, as though it had always been recording, always watching. I stayed crouched, the damp pressing through clothes, the smell of earth heavy and sweet. The wind moved across the grass, but there was no sound but the soft hum of the machine, the field holding everything in suspension. The fog thickened, swallowed the cabin, the figure, even a faint echo of my own steps. And I remained still, kneeling on wet grass, breath shallow, alone, or perhaps mirrored in the field that never ends.